Thought I'd start by asking Mr. Jones. It has to be surreal seeing your life turned into cinematic drama. What's a moment in the film that for you best captured what it felt like to be living through those times, and maybe a moment where, despite all best efforts, it couldn't fully capture what it felt like?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a 7-year journey for the Senate staff and senators working on this. You know, I think there's a scene that both opens the film and then you catch up to it in the middle with Corey Stahl and Adam Driver. You can kind of sort of feel the tension and the pressure of what those 7 years meant. That's the one for me that gets me every time.
For Mr. Burns, by and large, in large part adapting a nearly 7,000-page report, you present this rich trove of detail, which has already been a noted hallmark of your work, of your fact-based scripts. Can you talk about cracking this story as a dramatic narrative that's going to be wonky in a great way, but also have to get its emotional hooks into an audience?
Well, first of all, Dan did a lot of the heavy lifting because he took a 7,000-page report and turned it into a 500-page summary.
Right.
So I never read the 7,000
Fair
pages.
point.
So from 500 to 120 is a lot less than from 7,000 to 500. That being said, there were two parts to the story that I felt, would make a really entertaining ride for people. One was an agreement that Dan and I had, which is whenever I could, I used the language and the facts that are in the report to tell the story of the program. And so there was that side, which is the story of the program. And then the other thing, and it didn't really become clear to me that this was going to be useful, was when Dan and I started communicating. I asked him what the process he went through was. Looking back on a film like The Informant, which was also ostensibly fact-based, what I needed in that story was a character that could kind of take the audience through that particular labyrinth. And when I met Dan, it was a similar sort of feeling, like this is a tracer bullet through this story and this system, and the audience can watch this person go on that ride. And Adam was extraordinary in sort of conveying this very Kafkaesque experience of learning this story and then trying to get it out into a world that wasn't sure if it wanted to hear it.
Edward Snowden gets invoked twice in the film. How close did you come to becoming the next Snowden?
Well, there's two types of whistleblowers. There's the Edward Snowden whistleblower that goes from government to the media and releasing information. There's the whistleblower that's happening right now, the Ukraine inquiry, which goes through proper channels, right? You provide a complaint of wrongdoing and you're protected, you're not going to get fired, your promotions aren't going to be impacted. And then what I did is oversight, and that's an entirely different arena. And I have staff around me and senators around me who wanted to support that effort to get the report out. So, whistleblowers have a far more stressful time identifying and pushing out wrongdoing than I did, because it was my job.
Did you ever have a moment, though, where you thought about going that avenue of speaking to the press, or rather leaking to the press, maybe?
Well, there were plenty of channels to do it properly, right? Senator Udall from Colorado said he was going to read it on the Senate floor if it didn't get released. So I had people around me who wanted to make this happen. So I never felt like it was something that was even crossed my mind in terms of something we should do.
That being said, though, Dan did tell me that there were reporters who did approach him. So that scene, although it never went down like that, the experience for Dan did. There were people who would come up to him who would say, if you gave us the report, we would print it.
Yeah, that was from a story that I relayed to Scott, where someone from a very senior news organization came up and said, we've discussed it. If you gave us the report, we would print it all tomorrow. That was a sort of a common occurrence.
And my reason for invoking the name of Edward Snowden was to help the audience understand that sort of taxonomy of whistleblowers.
Right. Which, of course, is, as you point out, all too relevant at the moment again.
Right.
This is your directorial debut. Did you specifically shadow a production before you got started, or what did you feel like you wanted to do to feel completely confident that you were ready to go?
Well, I didn't go to film school, but I did spend 14 or 15 years collaborating with Steven Soderbergh on 4 movies, and I was on set every day of those 4 movies, so I probably spent 200 shoot days shadowing, one of the best directors that we have in America today. And so, Steven really had a huge influence on me in terms of making sure that you have a plan and that you create a grammar for the film in terms of the color palette you're using, the lenses you're using, the language of, of the movie. I knew from having had the experience of writing the script, so I sort of know where all the bodies are buried emotionally, that, there's a moment in the scene that Dan mentioned with Corey Stoll where I had said to Adam from the beginning, I'm saving that moment for our most extreme close-up because I really want that moment to land. And so there were things that I had learned, because Stephen had done something very similar to that in a picture that we had worked on together. So I understood, certain things that you only get from being about this far away from one of our masters.
Yeah. Talking about film grammar and the use of the close-up, I know one of the things you've said you're most proud of about the film is the way you convey to the audience what that room had to feel like,
Sure.
but also how it was, you wanted it to feel like it was encroaching slowly on the character. Can you talk a bit about how you went about achieving that effect?
Yeah, there was a feeling of claustrophobia that I wanted to create because it is ostensibly a political thriller. And I knew that Dan had done his work in what he had described as a windowless room, and so Ethan Tobman, the production designer who actually did the movie Room, so he had a great deal of familiarity with windowless rooms. We kind of constructed this space. And again, I had said I want, as the film goes on, for us to keep getting closer and closer. And that also informed some of the work we did on the script. I didn't want to let the air out of that by getting into Dan's home life and his other experiences, and that the relief from this windowless room would come when he finally met with Corey Stoll. And I was really fortunate, and after an exhaustive location search, the place where I found to do that scene was all windows. And as soon as I saw that location, I was like, this is the perfect antidote to the first half of the movie. And I knew that that scene was going to end with the line, you have a sunlight problem. And so that was something where, again, we kind of knew that we needed to go from this windowless room to this other experience for him. And that location was a godsend.
Mm. You also made what I think is a wise choice to focus on the facts and the professional situation and not follow Daniel Jones home to see his home life. But I wonder, did you have a home life? The film sort of suggests that it was so all-consuming that, what was that like?
Yeah, well, any good researcher or investigator knows that you can go deep in the weeds very quickly, and this was like a 7-day-a-week gig for nearly 7 years. So there's a reference in the beginning about not being a very good partner, right, to anyone in your life, right, friends, family, girlfriends, etc., because you're not around, and so it captures that quite well. There wasn't much to tell, right? We were seeing maybe some empty refrigerators and things like that, but it was a nonstop slog for quite a while.
And I did write those scenes, and it's interesting because one of my other sort of touchstones for this project was the movie Serpico. And looking back at that movie, the moments that I'm least engaged in what Frank Serpico is doing were the scenes when you went home with him. And so that also sort of informed that choice, that my way of communicating the rigor and the devotion to the mission at hand was to get away from the extraneous scenes that I think we've seen in movies before.
And you already brought up, how difficult it was to take a 525-page report. Scott did this masterful job of turning it into a 2-hour film. We could have easily probably added 30 minutes to an hour of other content of the Senate report. So Why would you? You don't need to see more of me. You need to see more of the report.
So you mentioned Serpico, and I know you've also mentioned the great 70s paranoid thrillers like 3 Days of the Condor, The Parallax View, All the President's Men, of course. Did it give you, I know that informed the visual look of the film too, this austere look. Did it give you any pause? Did you worry at all about, well, it's a film that's potentially dry, there's a lot of information, and then I'm going to have this austere look. It's almost, I would be worried, I think, if I were making that film about the contemporary audience and keeping their attention span with the film.
Yeah, you know, going back and looking at those films, you know, when you are asking the audience to take on a lot of information, I think a lot of the visual dazzle ends up distracting them. And so, you know, there were things that I felt we could do really simply. And, you know, the other thing that we had is the challenge of two timelines. There's the timeline that Dan has, but there's also in the first half of the movie a number of flashbacks. And to help separate those, I had decided that the flashbacks were going to be handheld. There would be less of a depth of field. We added a layer of grain. So we did, you know, we pushed the color palette in those one direction, the color palette of the main timeline in another direction. And I felt that that visual interest was going to be enough to keep people leaning in. And the rest of it, you know, and maybe this is my writer side coming through, is if you get into a scene late and you get out early, that's really what holds an audience's attention, is, you know, ending every scene with a question and answering in the next scene in an unexpected way.
Mm-hmm. Certainly does. It's a pacey film. It's never dull for a moment. I'm curious what your impressions were of Adam Driver from both of you. You know, he was tasked with playing you, and I know he talked with you, and why was he, for you, the right man to play the role?
When I finished the script, I shared it with Steven Soderbergh, and we had a conversation about, you know, what the character was made of, because when you get into a casting situation, that's really what you start thinking about. And there were two things about Adam that, you know, really informed our decision. The first one was there's really nothing that guy does that isn't interesting to watch. And I knew that I would need scenes of him just staring at his computer screen, and yet Adam is able to place so much on his face that was fantastic. The second thing is because Daniel Jones was not a famous, well-known person, I didn't have to ask an actor to do an imitation. But what Steven told me was a common thing they have is a kind of rigor and obsessiveness to their work that he felt Adam would really connect with. And when I first met with Adam, that was in fact the case. Adam, you know, really wants to know details and is relentless with that in his scene work. You know, if there's a thread hanging, you know, on his wardrobe, he'll spend the whole scene doing his lines, working on that, because as it turns out, that's what human beings do, because right now I actually do.
No, I think Adam is just so spectacular, right? To him, it was really important to not only like know the lines, but understand the lines and the context under which those lines are being read. The same can be said for Annette and John and the entire cast. I was just sort of blown away by how engaged they were and how much they wanted to get, like Scott, the facts of the actual report itself right.
Yeah, you mentioned Annette Bening, who of course plays Senator Dianne Feinstein, I think those scenes provide some of the most useful dramatic tension in the movie. Even at their simplest, that relationship is so fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to work in that office with her?
Well, I mean, Senator Feinstein is just like, she's incredible, right? I mean, coming out of San Francisco here, where we are today, to what she's doing now in the Senate. I mean, she just never gives up. Talking about working 7 days a week for years, I mean, that's what she does. And, you know, you have 5 minutes to do the CI's detention interrogation program, the next 5 minutes is healthcare, the next 5 minutes is water issues in California, and then tax policy. I mean, this is their lives, one thing after another, and she's just a huge inspiration. I'm just so thankful I got to work with her for a number of years.
I mean, it's funny, I sent the script to Annette probably before I sent it to anybody through her agent, and we went to lunch, and I was blown away by how much she knew about politics. And this goes all the way back, you know, it's something that she shares with Warren Beatty. I mean, Warren was with Bobby Kennedy on the last day of his life and has obviously a long history of politics, but they are political junkies. And, you know, she said something to me about the script, which I had hoped would be her response, which is, you know, the only thing more powerful than telling someone a story they don't know is telling someone a story that they thought they knew and that they then learned they didn't really fully understand it. And she understood that that was my goal as a screenwriter and really wanted to communicate that. As it turns out, she went to university here in San Francisco during the time when Harvey Milk was killed and Senator Feinstein became mayor. And so she had followed her for a long time and really had a great insight into who she is. You know, we shot the movie in 26 days, which, as you probably know, is not enough time. And, you know, even crueler than that, when the movie was initially budgeted, when we were at HBO, they told us I would have 52 days. So I got less than half my budget in the end and less than half my days. But the good thing about that is if we'd had all that time, I probably would have been tempted to explore prosthetics and do things like that. Instead, Annette and I understood that to get through 6 pages a day, we would have to come up with a distillation of the character that was enough so that you would go, oh, yeah, that's Senator Feinstein, but not so much that you would be sitting there going, well, is this really a great imitation or not? And so in a way, we wound up in a really good place because she is just extraordinary.